seeing it's the time that we had. So, no mai haere mai, ki tēnei hui. Do you want to start off with saying a few words, Stephen?
Yes, morena councillors. Just to explain, this is a Q&A session, so it's not us introducing the report. That's tomorrow. So we're not going to do that this morning. Pretty much, really just answer any questions that you might have. We have a number of written questions that have come in, and we will get them out later this afternoon. So we're working on those. Okay.
Okay. So, is there anything the team want to say before we start, or do you want to just go straight into questions? Baz?
We'll go straight into questions.
Hey, all right. Anybody got any? We're at a Q&A session. Without the Q and the A, it's just and.
I could add something.
Yes,
here.
go, off you go, Steve.
Rebecca, you'll notice that in the pack there is a performance on a page kind of view, and that suggestion was made by councillors at the last quarterly report. So we have done that. It's at a high level, but it gives you a good kind of overview of the key information, and we would intend that that becomes a feature of the reporting pack. Obviously there's a lot more detail in the report than on that page, but at a glance you can see how we're tracking.
Thank you, and apologise for my mini sneezing fit there. I think just allergies, nothing to worry about. Yes, yes. Right, councillors, do you have questions? Look, you're all here. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yes, this is more of a timing. I sent through 2 blocks of questions yesterday and one lot was late. So should I ask those ones now rather than...
We're going to answer them and get them out this afternoon, so that will be part
That's
of the
nice
pack.
of you. I missed the deadline. Okay,
We're doing our best.
I'll just regroup.
Thank you, Councillor Free, for having a question.
Well, it's actually more about the LTP, but maybe I can ask it here. In the past, we've had quite thick folders with the quite detailed financial information for our LTP. Is it possible to have something like that, so it doesn't just broad categories, it actually breaks it down into, like for example, the Cycleway budget, it might break down the budget for Evans Bay 2, Brooklyn Hill or whatever. And we've always had that. Is it possible? Just one hard copy in the Councillors' Lounge would suffice. But,
I can certainly look into that for the final LTP process. I'll talk to...
Yeah, it would be helpful before we make to have our deliberations.
I don't think you killed it because it wasn't there to start with. So, councillors, do you have any other questions about the...
Perhaps the other thing I could also
Yes, thanks, Stephen. Thank you.
is in the report we do have the CCOs, and they're not coming tomorrow because we've already had that hui around the statement of intent conversation a couple of weeks ago. But we have made a few changes to the kind of the consistency of financial information, which we had a helpful conversation with Councillor Brown on that, just so that there is a consistency in terms of the way that financial information is presented. And over time, and we would ideally like to have one common kind of reporting standard in terms of the financials at a more detailed level, but probably the challenge there is that each of our CCOs do use different systems, but we are working on trying to get one single view, which will make it easier for councillors to understand. At a glance they're all consistent, but we have made some changes to improve the readability and understandability of that information.
Oh, great, we're warming up. Councillor Randall.
Yes, so, I think this is a very straightforward report, which is, I guess, one of the reasons the council the councillors haven't had too many questions, but I want to just call out a particular comment in the executive summary, which says the pace of delivery to our large capital program continued to increase in the face of rising inflation and overall market conditions. This is about the quarterly 3 report, but of course, all the chickens come home to roost in the quarterly 4 end of year report. Can officers comment on the inflation pressure and whether or not, how we're tracking in terms of where we're going to be at the end of the financial year?
Well, of course, as part of this quarterly 3 report, we don't just look at the last quarter, we also look at what we're anticipating for the forecast for the full year. So we have certainly put a lot of effort into that. I think in terms of the capital expenditure program, that's going to be characterised by a couple of really significant projects. The first one's the sludge minimisation plant, because of course that has the way in which that has been delivered and the timing when we were expecting that capital expenditure to be incurred versus when it has been delayed, and so we just need to match that and the revenue that we get in from the levy and through the SPV that matches. So it does mean that the financials and the capital expenditure program paints a slightly challenging story, because you have to sort of look behind what that is telling. There are a couple of other projects that will always continue to challenge us in terms of inflationary pressures, and because of the sheer size and scale of those. But we are still working very much to the budgets that have been set. So that includes Te Matapihi, which is on track, and of course we're working to the midpoint range on the Town Hall budget as well. So I guess what we're working towards in the current existing environment is slightly different to what we're anticipating going forward as well, because we've got those contracts locked in and we're working very much to those. It's the future projects that we're also looking at increasing costs and those inflationary pressures.
Okay, just a couple of follow-ups. In terms of where the sludge treatment plant costs are going, because we've proposed a certain levy in the long-term plan, is our officer still confident that that's reasonably accurate?
The levy itself,
yes.
or
yeah,
yes,
the
absolutely, absolutely. So. And the levy has in fact been signed off by MHUD in the last week. So we've reached a significant milestone with that. The team have worked incredibly closely with CHIP, the CIP. So they have worked really carefully with them to model what those costs are and to make sure that that's all on track. So that's definitely on track. And everything else is going to plan.
Okay, and lastly, I know that from the transport briefing that we had the week before last, there's a whole lot of work kicking off under as part of the City Council's takeover of the planning for all these different projects. I mean, how certain is the budget for that for this financial year, between now and June, in terms, is that all on track?
So in terms of the planning aspects, that's not a huge spend, so that is on track. Bike network plan, I think, in terms of the rollout of that transport portfolio, I think we're 4 million behind, likely to be 4 million behind at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about some of the projects that are running behind budget. So the sludge minimisation project has an underspend. Is that serious? I mean, what does that relate to?
So that's just vendor procurement. So that's just delays with vendor procurement. What we found is that it's all overseas vendors, so their terms and conditions are far more onerous than they were, say, this time 2-3 years ago. So it's just taking longer it's the construction JV that's responsible for doing that vendor procurement. It's just taking longer for them to negotiate these contracts.
Because of equipment,
but they're not on critical path. So the vendor procurement isn't on critical path. So it isn't putting there's not putting the program at risk. It's just meaning that our spend isn't being spent as it was originally planned.
And has all the electricity issues, like the power supplies and stuff, all been resolved?
So in terms of the design of that's all been agreed. The works are moving at pace. It still is presenting probably the largest risk to program. So we just need to make sure that we keep on with getting that connection in place. It's not us doing it, it's Wellington Electricity and their contractors, so it just adds another level of complexity.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And still on electricity, the streetlight remediation project is finished, but is there any plan to do some infill lighting? Because remember, we were going to do some in, I think, in Miramara and Tawa.
Yeah, so we'll be picking that up again next year. We put all that on hold when we undertook to do the spigot removal program, so we'll be picking up that in
Is there still budget for that?
Yeah, that will be, I'll double check on that and come back to you. I'm pretty sure there is.
Thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I was just looking and I saw the HUP2 budget is in red. Is that something that is moving closer towards green through the proposed long-term plan funding?
So once if the long-term plan proposal is approved for HUP2, that will move to green.
And then my other one, was there anything that came out of this report that I guess we haven't identified in the LTP so far that we should be aware of?
I can have a go at answering that. So no, as the short answer. But just in terms of the planning process, maybe it's helpful if I just talk about that, because obviously Deirdre and her team, they work very carefully through looking at what's the current result for that last quarter, what are we expecting for the remaining couple of months for the financial year. And of course, in preparing this information, we're already through April, so we're starting to get a really good picture of what that looks like. The team have also been working really closely with budget managers and right across the organisation, particularly the chiefs, to look at what does that mean in terms of the long-term plan, what are the cost pressures that this could create in the long-term plan because of things that may not have been completed, etc. And where are we at with our capital expenditure program, what carry forwards need to be pulled forward, those kind of things. So as part of the work that we will bring you on the 30th of May through the deliberations process, we're looking at providing what those cost pressures are, how we're mitigating those, what those carry forwards are likely to be, and what that means for the profile of our debt to revenue expenditure. So we're wrapping that all up into making sure that as at 1 July, we've considered all that into the next year's budget. For the councillors that have been here previously, that's a slightly different process than what we've completed in the past. So some of you may recall that we've set the budgets and then we've done the carry forwards at a later date. So we've always had to look at budget plus the carry forwards. We've done that beforehand so that you've got one source of truth being the budget and the long-term plan. So that's been quite a progress, and the team have worked remarkably hard to do that. We changed approaches and were flexible and agile during COVID, but we've brought it back into our process that we would normally expect to see.
That's great news. So I've seen your hand up, Councillor Chung, but I'll just go to Deputy Mayor Foon first.
I might have to have a few goes if that's okay. So just on page 99, there's a snapshot of emerging indicator trends. Can I just get an understanding of what where that source came from? 99. It's on our community outcomes page.
That comes from. That's the result from our last annual report. So we only report on it yearly.
Yeah. Okay. So the survey that we do. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's not the survey. It's the analysis of the data that underpins the outcome indicators for the last LTP. So that's done yearly.
Okay.
And it's reported in the annual report.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll report again in our next.
In the next report. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions on Te Atakura. Stephen, I know that I've asked these, but it would be good to just have a little update here. So I guess the main concern is that we've got some changes and we've got a pretty ambitious target. And so I just want to understand our modelling and if we are thinking we are still going to reach our target, or is that gap increasing? Yeah, just how are we doing that?
Alison is at the microphone.
Oh, hello. Yeah.
Is that on? Yes. I'm just answering that question for you now. In 2021, we did modelling of city emissions, and that showed that we had a 36% gap between what we had modelled were likely emission reductions and where our target is. That's likely to have changed with the change of central government because they have changed what policy settings they have. They are due to release their second emissions reduction plan in the middle of this year, so we can update that modelling later this year in response to that and see kind of where we're at in the city. It's worth noting that of that 57% reduction, we thought 20-odd% was likely, and we've already achieved 11 in the last 3 years, just to try and give you a sense of scale and where we're at currently.
Great, thank you. Just a couple more climate questions on just the campaign that we had. I thought we agreed on that last LTP, so we've decided not to do that. So is there, was there a budget change? And I just want to understand the reasons behind that decision to not do the campaign.
So in the 2021 LTP, we talked about doing climate action education work. So there's a gap in understanding between people's enthusiasm, wanting to do climate action, and knowing specifically what the high impact actions they could take in their personal life are. We had set aside a small amount of money in the LTP to work on that question and to work through what those high impact actions were and how we would best communicate them. We then received that DIA grant. That was a significant amount of money that would have allowed us to run a very high profile and large campaign. But when that funding was withdrawn, we no longer have the funding to do a large scale, high profile campaign. So we're instead focused on smaller scale pieces of work. So we have information on our website. We have our transport behaviour change team who are regularly talking to people about changing transport behaviour. We have a waste education team that does the same thing in waste. So because of that loss of funding, we're no longer doing something big and flashy, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing work in that space.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chung?
Yes, so I wanted to ask about infill lighting. Now, did you want us to renew our request for these things? I've had requests in for some time, but of course with the lights falling down, that was all postponed. So do we renew that into some other sort of process, or what do we do?
Councillor Chung, if you have a request for a specific area, just email it through using the EMS function. So we make sure we record it, and it will get through to Brad's team.
Excellent, great, thank you.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, I'm probably going to show my ignorance, but I want to ask a little bit about this, the debt and borrowing. So just because I don't quite get the terms. So the net debt of the liquidity ratio, what does that really mean? And is 110 a minimum, so we're doing better than we need to be doing? Can you just explain that a little?
Do you want to? So in terms of the 110, yes, that's the minimum, and so we're doing better. But it is an area that we're constantly looking to monitor. So it's making sure that we have enough money to pay our debts as they fall due, in effect, so that we've got the cash available to us as and when we need it. So within the debt, we need to make sure we have some amount of we call them liquid assets, but cash assets that we can actually pay off other debts as we fall due. So it really is about managing the timing of things and when we've got things on hand. So we're always modelling what our cash requirements are, making sure that we're focused on that really carefully because we are managing that quite tightly. We don't want to hold significant amounts of cash while we're holding debt on the other hand, so it's a real balancing exercise, but we do need to make sure that we're prudently managing things. So That's kind of my plain English way of explaining it. Hopefully
that's what I
makes
needed.
sense.
That's good. And then can I just ask about 27? What does it mean to pre-fund? Can you just explain borrowing additional, but pre-funding the 290 million and what that really means, again, in plain English?
Okay, so in effect, what we do is when we need money, when we need debt, we can't just rock up to the bank and say we need $20 million more. What happens is the local government funding agency runs a process where they call on people to say how much debt will you need in the future. So it's not like we have this kind of individual requirement to go, we need this amount, we need this amount. So what we need to do is we need to carefully plan throughout the course of the year when we're going to draw down money through the LGFA process, because they of course go out to the market and they seek to borrow that from the market and then on lend to us. So what we're looking at doing, we also want to make sure that not all of our debt falls due at the same time, so we need to spread that. And so to mitigate that risk, we look to ensure that we have the funding smoothed, I guess, in the right way possible. And we also look to, draw down in the right ways to manage that. So we're looking to pre-fund. We've got some pre-funding where we've drawn down that money. We're holding it aside. We're earning really good interest rates, actually better interest rates than what we are paying through our debt. And so that we can smooth accordingly and that we can manage our appropriate.
So the other question I was going to ask is, overall, how much did our debt rise in Q3? Because I'm just trying to figure out what this really does mean.
I don't have the Q3 figure, but over the last 3 quarters, it's increased by 211 million.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So,
Chris, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I suppose one of the other benefits of pre-funding is that we can take advantage when the market rates are actually quite good.
Yeah.
So we're not just at the whim of what the rate is on that particular day. And just to reiterate Andrea's point, we always try to make sure that it's cash flow neutral as a minimum, so we're always earning more interest than what we're paying.
So basically we went and asked for a loan and we got some money and we've put it on term deposit because we don't need it right now.
Correct.
Okay, understand. Thank you. And thank you very much for the work done to include the carry forwards. It will make it much simpler for us.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Sorry. Just give me a moment, caller. Here we go. Just the increased utility costs, is there... we had a plan to look at transitioning our gas costs to electric, and now we don't, but the utility costs are increasing. So is there... Have we made a trade-off there? What component of that is gas? If we transition to electric, would we be decreasing those costs?
I'm not sure. We haven't necessarily looked at the specific modelling around decreasing of costs. I guess the thing that we're wanting to do and looking at the decarbonisation was really about how we're managing our emissions and doing that in a really effective way. So utility costs are going up both from an electricity and a gas perspective, but they're slightly different. There's slightly different questions there because the cost may be cost neutral, but it is likely to be what is the most sustainable from an emissions perspective over time.
Okay. Just on that with water, just noting that there were impact on our parks through not having water available to water them. That's a little first sign of some of the challenges ahead. And noting that we've put in a water tank collecting rainwater at Berrinpore Nursery, is there budget to start looking at those types of systems in our parks and rec portfolios around our parks?
Kia ora, Councillor. Yes, yes and no. Yes, there is budget. Yes, this is the kind of work that we do on an ongoing basis anyway. No, if we would actually make the changes, have we fully figured out what the cost and funding will be?
Yeah, okay. Could be a good investment. just the child and youth strategy, just the youth hub, is that still on? Are we still working toward that?
Yes, we are. Yep, so we have the temporary one going with the Y down on just opposite Te Aroha.
Te Aroha, okay.
Yep, and the new one is not that far off from being completed.
Okay, great. And just cycleways, like there just seems like a lot of amber over that. Are there different reasons for the amber, for the timing? Just more of an overview.
Yeah, there are different reasons. Timing is a big one with the ability to get contractor resource to deliver these things quicker than we have done before. We do have a new contractor panel, so we're bedding that in as we go. So the original program was extremely aggressive, but there are also other issues with some increases in scope where we're trying to put in raised crossings, for instance. A lot of feedback from the community through the extensive engagement through the Bike Network Plan has meant that we have probably done more work than planned just to respond to that community feedback as well. So, but overall within the program, we're managing within the overall program budget.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Chung?
Sorry, did I still have my hand up?
Still have your hand up. That's okay. No more questions?
Sorry.
No?
Sorry,
All
I'll reduce that. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of the questions. I just wanted to note that there have been no written, you might want to listen, Tim, there have been no written questions about Wellington Water at this point, so Wellington Water won't be attending. So if you have, suddenly your brain goes on fire about that, maybe email Siobhan or, so, but otherwise they won't be in attendance for that Q&A session. All right. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.